The Coming Out of Mr. Little's Spirit. From the collection, these stories saved my life. Mr. John Little lived quietly with his wife, Miss Cindy Lou, across the ditch from my family in Lacey Bottom, Mississippi. This mostly black settlement was at the foot of the Shelley Waddell Hills on the outskirts of Meridian, Mississippi. Lacey Bottom was a heavily wooded community located in the heart of East Mississippi and West Central Alabama. Most of the black people who lived in this community worked in the fields of nearby farmers. Flatbed trucks would come to Lacey Bottom in the morning to pick up adults and children for the hot, rough ride to work in the seasonal crops of cotton, watermelon, string beans, corn, tomatoes. Whatever the farmers were growing in a season, the black people harvested. Some of the black women of Lacey Bottom worked in the homes of white women as maids, babysitters, and cooks. Some of the black men worked as drivers, gardeners, and pulpwood choppers. Most of the black people had little money and menial jobs, trying to make a better way of life for themselves and their children. Black folks prided themselves on how far they had come when they could get a plot of land in Lacey Bottom, Mississippi. My grandfather built our four-room house with his own hands from scraps of wood and other materials he collected around town with his horse and buggy. He had worked to end his sharecropping debt and saved to provide a home for his family to the best of his ability. The black people of Lacey Bottom were fancy in their hearts. In the homes and restaurants where they worked, they saw how glamorous white people lived. Because of this, they tried to replicate this fanciness to the best of their ability in their own homes. 5 wooden four-room houses with tin roofs stood gracefully among the pine, pecan, and plum trees laced with honeysuckle and blackberry bushes in the heart of Lacey Bottom. Intricately decorated outhouses made of scrap wood with ribbed tin roofs were painted cheap shades of blue, yellow, brown paint. The sparkling clean outhouses lined the east side of the Lacey Bottom dried-up ditch. Many people gathered fruits like pears, plums, figs for making preserves. Some people collected herbs like sassafras, peppermint, spearmint, mullein, fevergrass, chamomile, and white oak bark for making medicines. While there was an easygoing country lifestyle, there was an implicit roughness in this Mississippi existence. We could hear it from the chicken shack, the local neighborhood juke joint. The chicken shack sat in the forest and rang out the sounds of Mississippi blues all day long when it was open. The bass continually put out the survival beat, while the melody of the piano reminded everyone to go to church on Sunday. The heat was riving up. By the time Miss Lula May finished frying the chicken, it was a serious country party. Slim Jim, the guitar player, struck a chord to ease the horror. God knows help was needed from somewhere. By the time the drummer connected the sounds to Mother Earth, all of Lacey Bottom seemed to be swaying with the wind. If a singer was in the juke joint, without fail, somebody would wave a hand, cuss, shake some booty, and or shed a tear. The serious weekend wang, dang, doodle would begin late Friday afternoon when Mr. Shelley Waddell, an old white man who lived up in the hills adjacent to Lacey Bottom, would come down from his whiskey still in an old blue 1950 Chevrolet. Lauderdale County, the governing seat of Lacey Bottom and its sister town, Meridian, was a dry county until the mid-1960s. It was illegal to sell, drink, or possess any type of alcohol. But no one ever stopped, arrested, or harassed old man Waddell. He would drive up to the front door of the chicken shack and have two of his white boy cronies unload the truck full of illegal fire water. By the time the black men and women had enough of what was locally called poot whiskey or moonshine, the rage of somebody's life had to come out. A fight was inevitable. You could hear the sash of a fist and the riff of a knife cutting through the echoes of B.B. King, Bobby Blue Bland, John Lee Hooker, or whatever blues singer was being played on the Rockola, a free standing machine that played 45-inch music records. Mr. John Little was a contrast to this environment. There were a lot of tall bushes around his house, which was sitting on the west side of the Lacy Bottom Ditch. It was a big, spooky looking house, which had better quality materials than other homes. The speckled brown siding and thick, shining tin roof looked more expensive than the plain wooden houses with thin tin roofs. My two cousins who lived next door to us and I would watch the strange looking house from across the ditch. We knew someone lived there, but never saw anyone. We wondered about all those cages in the backyard. What were they? Why were they there? Why was the tin on their roof so thick and shiny? Was that siding stuff expensive? What was it like to have a screened-in back porch? What did people do in such a place? We watched to see what questions we could answer. We would move along the ditch on our side to get a better view. Pulling the bushes back, we were trying to see in a way befitting of curious little girls. There was a flat wooden plank that served as a bridge across the waterless ditch. We were not allowed to cross that bridge. One summer day, we actually saw the back screen door open. Mr. John Little walked out. We were as quiet and as still as life would allow. I was so excited I didn't know where to look first. I took a deep breath, focused my cat-like eyes, and decided to start from the bottom up. From the ground, his black riding boots stopped at his knees. Khaki pants were stuffed inside the boots. The black belt he wore foretold a small frame. Wearing a long-sleeved khaki shirt, his arms were covered with some kind of net and thick padding. His slim, pale hands were uncovered. He carried a long-handled net in his right hand. By the time I reached the top of his head, I had to catch my breath. I could not see his face. The safari hat he was wearing blocked my view because it was draped with a heavy net. Scholars would describe us as economically poor black female adolescents growing up in segregated rural Mississippi. We did not know we were poor. We were three happy little curious girls. Like children all over the world, we wanted to know about our neighbors. Well, we saw something that mid-1950s day. The automatic bulging of our eyes was as natural as the shallow breaths we took as Southern girls. The shock of it all was part of our upbringing. We thought we had seen something from another world. Maybe we had. We watched in frozen posture as the little white man walked steadily toward the cages. The path was worn. We were amazed as he opened his first cage. He gently pushed the long-handled net that he carried in his right hand into the cage. We could see and hear the swarming of bees as they covered his hands and arms. Calmly, he completed his beekeeping task and returned inside the mysterious house. We were so outdone, we didn't know what to do. We looked at each other in wonder. Slowly, we backed up from the bushes in our best quiet step. We tipped home speechless. One day, the little white man caught me peeping by myself. He beckoned through the bushes for me to come over. Against all known rules, I ventured across the ditch. As soon as I stepped on that plank, I violated the core of my family's safety rules. I walked over of my own free will. He took my hand and led me around the narrow path leading to his front door. Up close, without all his beekeeping gear, I could see that he was a small, pale white man. His auburn-colored hair was mixed with gray. Small gold-rimmed glasses circled his eyes. Thick eyebrows matching his hair flopped around his forehead. He was a slow-moving man. I have something for you to give to your grandmother, he said as we made our way toward the front porch. I guess he had been watching us too. His wife, Miss Cindy Lou, was sitting in the swing on the front porch, swaying back and forth in an easy motion with her bare feet. She slowed down as we approached. She said, "Hello," in a kind voice. He followed her inside the screen door. I followed both of them inside their home. Obviously, I was in a daze. My grandmother was in her early 50s during this era. She was a gentle, firm disciplinarian. Your head can get as clean as the palm of my hand, but you will always do what I say, she continuously reminded me. This was backed up with the down thrust eye protection. Y'all gonna miss me when I'm dead and gone. She was our family caretaker. Everyone else worked. My survival depended on my ability to conform to her rules. Thankfully, she was a seasoned, loving woman. Grandmother did not allow me to be going into other folks' houses on our side of the ditch. All the children of Lacey Bottom inherently knew at an early age the difference between black and white people. I had to have direct permission to go into my cousin's house. It was unthinkable to cross the bridge and go over to the house of these white people's world. In spite of it all, I found myself at that moment in life walking across this bridge following a white man. I was actually allowing two white people to lead me inside their home. This violation of local cultural norms was enormous. Miss Cindy Lou led her husband and me inside the house down a wide hallway. Her long ponytail seemed to be swaying in tune with her bare feet. We walked straight through the hallway. On a table with a starched white tablecloth sat a brown Philco radio. The sound of the music playing was different from the bluesy vibrations of the chicken shack. The soft, classical sound could be heard as we entered the kitchen. Mrs. Little handed Mr. Little a jar without saying a word. He gave the jar to me, explaining, "This is honey. My wife makes it from the bees I take care of in the backyard." As my grandmother had patiently taught me, I thanked them while eyeing the delicious-looking treat. The honey was a golden tone with a deep brown cone standing erect in the middle of the mason jar. My boundaries had been expanded enough for one day. I thanked them again and made my way back across the bridge. When I showed my grandmother the honey, she looked at the honey. She looked at me. Finally, she opened the jar saying, "You're going to taste it first. If it kills anybody, it's going to kill you first." I was ready to die. The honey looked so delicious, and it was. It was such a soothing, cooling experience sliding down my throat. I still smile deeply at the memory. The next morning, Mama, as we affectionately called her, went out to her garden and picked a bucket of collard greens. She washed them thoroughly and chopped them finely. She cooked them in a big black cast iron pot on the wooden stove. Mama divided the collard greens and gave me half to take over to Mr. and Mrs. Little. That was the beginning of our neighborly exchange. We sat through births, deaths, political upheavals, tornadoes, and other tragedies from that day until the day we moved from Lacey Bottom. Since that time, I have traveled across many bridges of the world. I have tasted many types of food. No one cooks better collard greens than Mama. Nothing has been sweeter than the spirit of Mr. Little's honey. For these and all blessings, I am deeply grateful.